bot laner.
Thanks, guys. Great castle today. I'm here with Altec. After punching your ticket to the playoffs, I got to ask you, how does it feel?
I guess it feels kind of good because at first, like, the season started, we were doing really well. So it was kind of like, what if we don't make it after doing so well? So I'm really glad that we finally made the playoffs.
Speaking of, your second half of the season, obviously you guys started really hot. You were up, top of the table. What happened in the second half of the split to make you guys have so much more trouble, and how can you fix that going into playoffs?
Honestly, I think from the first half to the second half, a lot of the teams improved while we just kind of like we didn't improve at all. I think we were playing too many champions. We were like, I guess, a little too confident in a way. So I think now that moving to playoffs, I don't know who we're playing, but we're obviously going to respect them more.
So I think you're going to be playing up against CLG or Dignitas coming up. Is there any preference on who you guys do match up against in the playoffs?
I personally would like to play against Dignitas just because CLG has, well, over the past year, they've played really well in playoffs and they've won some titles. So obviously I'd want to play Dignitas, who's, I guess, the weaker team.
And if you do win there, you would be going to Vancouver, regardless of whether you'd be playing, in the first place match or the third place match. Being Canadian yourself, how much does it mean to actually play in Canada instead of here in the States?
I don't know. It'd be pretty. I guess there are not many words to say about that. It's just like I've always dreamt that I could win a finals, but like winning a finals in my hometown would, I guess, mean everything to me.
That'd be incredible. So the best of luck with that. Thank you very much for the interview. We're going to send it back to the desk to close out the day.
Thank you very much, Isaiah. Well, step one complete in terms of getting to play a finals in the hometown there for Altec. FlyQuest kind of squeaking by here at the very end of the split, making their way into the playoff picture. As was mentioned, seeding still not yet decided and will be determined by the outcome of the CLG Envy series in that kind of 4 through 6 slots. But let's talk this one through here because, funnily enough, we've talked about this whole split. Envy, or rather the league itself, it seems to be the closest league or split of any LCS we've ever had. And that, again, you look at, the kind of talent that you find on the 10th place roster or the 9th place roster of Team Liquid, for example, and you would not expect to see those kinds of names finishing in 9th place.
Right. I mean, to be fair, some of them didn't join right away, and
yes,
obviously you can't have a team with Piglet and Double F normally, so obviously Piglet's in mid lane. It's not quite what you would expect, but you still see some of the glimpses of why, these names are so highly regarded. The early games, generally speaking, for TL over the course of this series were not bad. Reignover was able to get going in multiple games, and that's kind of scary for potentially the promotion tournament teams coming in from the Challenger Series, that you have to worry about a Reignover who's not looking too bad.
Can you imagine being a Challenger team and hearing that the players you're going up against are Reignover, Piglet, Doublelift, Lorlo, and Matt? I mean, that is, again, most of these
what are
guys
they doing down here?
All those guys finishing the top half of the split last summer, right? Yep. So to think that these guys are now sitting down in 9th would definitely be a scary thing as a Challenger player. And then on the side of FlyQuest, though, I still have so many questions about how they'll perform going into the playoffs, because this was not a convincing series by any stretch of the word. And so in terms of, as Altec said, underestimating opponents and how they approach their next matchups, I gotta wonder what they're gonna focus on in this next week to improve.
For sure. I mean, they did go 2-0 this week, I believe, beating Dignitas and TL, but they were not super convincing. A lot of times they were behind the early game, where traditionally we were calling FlyQuest like a really early game-centric team, and they've shown that they can team fight a lot better, find weaknesses when other teams flub their engages a little bit. They can punish teams very hard, and I think that's something that they can look forward to, is the fact that they will not be playing, these super coordinated teams. Obviously, the Challenger Series teams do have certain strengths and weaknesses that they play to, but you're not fighting, P1, TSM, C9. It's not that level of competition, and you can probably hope to find weaknesses in these other teams, and you don't need to rely on forcing so many of your own plays. So that's something that they can I don't know what I'm talking about. They're in the playoffs. I lost my mind for a second.
That's all right.
Lost my mind for a second.
I was going to let you go. I mean, you were still talking about the merits of the team.
Yeah,
so
I was going to say, they seem to have found something that they can do in the late game, which is team fight. They won a lot of late game team fights versus Team Liquid this series.
One of which was a 4-0 coming at 28-30 here for FlyQuest, plus the Baron. So let's go ahead and take a look at this game ender in a sense.
Right, so it starts with a kind of flank attempt by Shen, which is a little weird. Usually you think that you want to group up, have the Shen split pushing the side lane, then TPN. Team Liquid you can argue not using their champions quite correctly. This is what I'm talking about, being able to punish mistakes. And
Right,
they
instead
go,
of the Shen coming to the fight's coming to the Shen.
Right, so everyone's trying to group up around Shen, oddly enough, and this causes a big positioning error on the side of Team Liquid. Rainover gets popped right into the team, focused down extremely quickly. Doublelift is also a little bit too far forward, able to get Nautilus ulted without really having to blow anything to get in range for that. And then it's an easy chase down for the rest of the team because they already got those couple pickoffs. That leads to the Bear, and this blew the game back in their favor because, once again, they were losing the early game versus Team Liquid. So I think you can see that, once again, that goal graph spiking heavily in FlyQuest favor towards the end of the game. And they did have good dragon control as well, so I think there's a couple of these kinds of things you can say, start building around that. And I thought Hai looked extremely good as well. He's one of the key players on the team, and he had a monster game.
Well, you brought him up, so we'll continue talking about him. Hai gets player of the game this time around on the Talon. We heard Kobe mentioning that we've seen some lackluster Talons, we've seen some great ones, but definitely a champion, or that can take over a game as an assassin, of course. And so having that in his wheelhouse, when you consider that he also, was at the beginning of the split playing really safe things like Corki and still has the Orianas in his tool belt, he's coming in with a pretty solid, flexible pool for FlyQuest to work with.
Right, and I think that was one of the things that we heard Alltech allude to in his interview when he was saying that we've been playing too many champions potentially in the middle of the split when they were playing the Mordekaisers and the Nautilus and the Blitzcranks in the bot lane. It's settled it down, no more Jarvan mid. If you want to play an AD assassin, you have Zed and Talon now. You don't need to do that kind of stuff. You can play the Orianas, the Victors, the more stable things. And I think Hai is a player who can actually play those two styles. He's always had a great Oriana, and he's always had a great Zed. And if you can find champions that aren't easily banned out, he can find a way to get off the ground. And I think the big thing is Moon. He struggled again a little bit versus Rainover in this matchup. You want to see him bounce back a little bit more, because they did rely on their early game a lot in the early season.
At the end of the day, for Team Liquid, it's going to be a tough loss to stomach because you've made all of these efforts and changes throughout the entirety of the split, all to serve the purpose of avoiding promotion tournament, and you just barely missed that. Now, of course, these guys still have the opportunity to play through the promotion tournament and re-earn their spot, in a sense, in the North American LCS, but so close. It's the closest we've seen a team come to getting out of the relegation tournament, the last game of the split.
It's a tough feeling to be into because getting that close and just need to win this game and having the lead and blowing it. It's not like a feel-good kind of loss at all. We're like, oh man, we looked really, it was a tough victory. We're against a great team. They could have beaten FlyQuest today. It was not that far out of their grasp.
And following beating TSM,
right, beating the number one team.
So it could have been a fantastic weekend for them. They just narrowly missed that. I just want to update everybody on standings here before we toss you to bonus coverage over on NA LCS 2. With that win, FlyQuest are guaranteed 5th or better in the standings. Of course, this will hinge on the result of the CLG NV game. If CLG win, they'll go 4th, FlyQuest 5th, Dignitas 6th. If CLG lose, CLG is 6th, Dignitas is 5th, and FlyQuest is 4th. So those, of course, are the remaining outcomes left to be. Immortals locked in 7th. Echo Fox snagged that 8th place, and Team Liquid in the promo tournament in 9th. But we're going to toss you over to NA LCS 2 to watch the conclusion of the series between CLG and